Words aren't just sounds we use to communicate. They shape how we think, how we feel, and how we treat ourselves. Some words steady us, and some challenge us in ways that help us grow. Others, they quietly wear us down without us even noticing. So, this new series is about slowing down and paying attention to the words that are closely tied to Philippine culture, the ones we live with every day, the ones we repeat in our heads, the ones spoken to us, the ones we say out loud, and the ones we've learned to believe. Because when language changes, a shift within us follows. So join me, Marie Chrysostomo, as we learn how to choose different words and how to say them to initiate change. So today's word is enough. Are we enough? Am I enough? Picture this scene where a child comes home holding a report card with passing grades, solid and earned, but they're not the best. And the first response isn't good job, it's why isn't it higher? Or you're just 2 points to 100. And so the child fumbles, unable to immediately explain the misses. That moment seems small, negligible even, but something important shifts because when effort isn't acknowledged, the message quietly changes. Achievement becomes a moving target. Pride in our success gets replaced by pressure. And without anyone saying it out loud, enough starts to disappear. So, in many homes, love comes unintentionally wrapped in expectations. Sometimes they're spoken to be better, to do more, or try harder. Sometimes they're silent, felt in sighs, comparisons, or the way praise is saved only for perfection. The intention is often love, protection, or preparation for a hard world, but the impact can be different. And though we had no name for it, what was happening was that a child learns that approval is conditional, that being valued depends on results, that rest is something to earn, not just something to deserve or we deserve. Over time, this teaches a dangerous lesson that worth is measured, ranked, and always just a few points away from acceptable. And this doesn't just stay in childhood, it follows people into adulthood, into work, relationships, and self talk. Every success feels temporary, every mistake feels like proof. The question, am I doing well, quietly turns into, am I doing enough? And the answer never feels like yes. Here's a truth that often gets missed: expectations are not the problem, growth is not the problem, wanting better is not the problem. The problem is when enough is viewed as a reward to be earned instead of a constant. Because encouragement fuels growth far better than comparison ever will. And a simple good job doesn't lower standards, it builds safety. And from safety, people actually rise. When enough is allowed to exist, effort feels meaningful again, and growth becomes something to move forward to, not something to chase out of obligation. If words stay with us long after they're spoken, it's worth asking what they were teaching us. Because long before we learned how to judge our own worth, someone else has set the rules, and that's perfectly fine. Early expectations play a quiet but powerful role in shaping self worth. From a young age, many children learn that value is tied to grades, obedience, and being hardworking. So when you're praised, mainly for achievements, you learn that rest has to be earned. When obedience is rewarded more than expression, you learn that approval comes from pleasing others. So, when comparison enters the picture, someone else did better, tried harder, sacrificed more, your worth stops feeling personal. And the lesson becomes this: to be loved, you have to keep trying harder. So over time, enough stops feeling valid. It feels temporary, something you can lose the moment you slow down, make a mistake, or fall behind. Even success doesn't feel secure because it can always be replaced by a higher standard. And that's why many adults struggle to feel satisfied even when they're doing well. Achievements feel brief, but pressure feels constant, and self worth becomes fragile, tied to performance rather than presence. Notice, when I praise someone, they always shrug me off and say, it's nothing. And I'm taken aback by it every time. I never ask them outright, but why would success be nothing? So, after a little bit of research and previous sessions with my psychologist, the simple explanation is that we learn this behavior. So, understanding this isn't about blaming our parents or families. I believe that the parents of Gen X and older generations did their best considering the circumstances that they had. And this is merely recognizing how early patterns shape inner voices, because once we see how enough became conditional, we can begin and learn to reframe how enough should literally be enough and not equated with doing more or being more. And this is the kind of enough that can't be taken away from us. Notice if expectations taught us to measure our worth and enough started to feel unstable, the next shift was even quieter. Love stopped being something we received and started becoming something we proved. So effort slowly became a kind of language. So this is how rest begins to feel uncomfortable. Pausing feels like wasting time. Slowing down feels like being irresponsible. Even when the body asks for a break, the mind answers with guilt, because in a culture shaped by hardship, stopping can feel dangerous. And so people learn to say yes even when they're exhausted. They show up even when they're running on empty. And they carry more than they're sharing, not because they're asked to, but because effort feels safer than absence. And the pressure doesn't come from one moment. It uh, it builds quietly. If effort is how love was expressed, then doing less starts to feel like caring less. Choosing rest feels like choosing yourself over others, and that can feel wrong. But here's the truth often missed: survival patterns don't always translate into healthy ones. What once kept a family going can later keep a person stuck. So, effort can be an expression of love, but it should not be the only one. Care doesn't have to hurt to be real, and love doesn't require constant self sacrifice to be valid. Learning this takes time, especially for those who grew up believing that pushing through was the same as being loyal. But unlearning pressure is not a betrayal of where you came from, it's a way of honoring yourself now. And that too is the form of self care. Ever ask yourself when enough can be enough? I'm tired. I'm doing everything I can. I've shown up, worked hard, cared deeply, and kept going because it also feels good. Some get paid while others put in more effort to earn more. So, what happens is that the feeling of relief is never fully felt. That's often the moment of noticing that approval is brief or non existent, that you give and work and barely have time for yourself. So the sense of being rested and feeling settled never quite sticks. And slowly a surprising realization forms that there has to be something better than this feeling day in and day out. The feeling of not being enough wasn't proof of a flaw. It was something learned, picked up from years of messages that tied effort to performance and worth to usefulness. Over time, that belief became internalized until it felt like truth. But it wasn't. You aren't lacking discipline, value, or effort. You're carrying a belief that said your place had to be earned again and again, and that belief turns even capable, generous people into perpetual strivers, always contributing, rarely making time for themselves. Understanding this changes the story. It reframes effort as something you offer, not something you owe. It separates growth from self erasure, and it allows rest to exist without guilt. The problem was never that you didn't try hard enough. The problem was that somehow our notion of love, safety, or belonging were conditional. And once that belief is named, it begins to loosen. And in that space, a quieter truth can finally land that you were never lacking. You are already enough, even before you proved anything at all. Reclaiming enough as an adult is less about changing your life overnight and more about changing what you measure. For a long time, worth may have felt tied to accumulation: more work, more effort, more responsibility, more proof. Adding becomes a reflex, not because it was needed, but because stopping felt risky, as if doing less meant becoming less. But adulthood offers a quiet choice. You can stop putting in so much effort just to feel worthy. This doesn't mean losing ambition or care. It just means recognizing when effort is coming from fear or obligation instead of purpose. It means noticing when you're saying yes to avoid guilt, not because you truly have the capacity. And it means understanding that worth doesn't increase just because your load does. So, one of the hardest mental reframes is allowing enough for today count. It's not perfect, not impressive, just enough. Enough energy spent, enough care given, enough tasks completed. Learning this requires honesty about your limits, your seasons, and your humanity. Some days enough looks productive, other days it looks really quiet, and both are valid. Rest is often the final thing that keeps us grounded. So, for those who learned early that effort equals value, rest can feel undeserved. But rest is not a reward, it's a requirement. It's how your body requirement, it's how your body recovers, how clarity returns, how creativity survives. Rest doesn't erase discipline, it sustains it. So reclaiming enough is an ongoing practice. You'll forget, you'll overdo it, you'll catch yourself measuring again, and that's okay. Each time you pause without apologizing, choose not to put in too much effort to prove something, because today you're rewriting the rules. Not by doing more, but by finally learning that enough can truly be enough. So, before this day ends, pause and ask yourself one simple question: what is enough for me right now? Not enough to impress, not enough to prove anything, just enough to be okay. So, let yourself stop without explaining. Let rest count. Let effort end where care begins. And if today's episode resonated with you, share this with someone you know who needs it. So, until then, take care and stay safe always.